Page 328 continued. Third, land grants led to the Brahminization and acculturation of the tribal peoples who were given scripts, calendar, art, literature, and a new way of higher life. In this sense, feudalism worked for the integration of the country. From their original homes in Madhya Desha and Terabhukti, Brahmanas were invited to enjoy land grants in Bengal, Orissa, and central India, which were thus brought close to one another within the orbit of the same culture. One of the main reasons why the four Varnas proliferated into numerous castes and the number of the mixed castes shot up to about 100, according to the Brahma Vaivarta Purana, was the necessity of finding a place in Brahminical society for various tribes which were brought into direct contact with the Brahmanas through land grants. Thus, land grants may be regarded as an important factor in annexing new areas and new peoples to the caste system, which served to give some kind of uniform social order to the whole country. At the same time, such grants created new titles to revenues, leading to the eventual fragmentation of political authority. The vastness of the country and the difficulty of communication made it all the more hard for the king to maintain political unity. In course of time, the Brahmanas and their patrons came to identify themselves with their respective localities and helped foster local culture, thus laying the basis for the rise of regional nationalities in the country. Page 329, para. Although the main traits of the feudal formations appear in India between the 6th and the 12th centuries, which was the time bracket for the growth of European feudalism, we notice only a few similarities between Indian feudalism and its European counterpart. The grant of villages to priests may be compared to the practice of giving benefices to the church in medieval Europe. But apart from an early start, the Indian feudal formation differs from the European in several other respects. Unlike Europe, India did not have a sharply defined class of feudal barons organized in councils and assemblies. Nor did it have, at least in early stages, much of military feudalism. What is more significant, in the Indian system, small-scale peasant plots were not tied to large-scale landowners' plots legally and economically. Feudal landlords in early medieval India did not directly interest themselves in organizing the cultivation of large stretches of land. Therefore, in India, regular labor service on the farms of the lords were not rendered by the peasants. We have mostly casual or occasional labor service required for war or construction purposes. In India, we do not have serfdom on any considerable scale, as was in the case with Western Europe. We have, however, a subject peasantry overburdened with all kinds of taxes and obligations. The economic hallmark of Indian feudalism was the absence of large farms or manors of the landlords and the prevalence of small-scale peasant production. The nature of production on a peasant plot was determined as much by the needs of his own subsistence as by the tax demands of the beneficiaries. It has to be stressed that in both Europe and India, the ever-present beneficiaries claimed from the peasants all kinds of dues on the strength of the royal charters issued to them, but because the peasants were in actual possession of the soil, oxen, and other agricultural accessories, they could resist the increasing demands made by the new-fangled landlords. This constant tug of war between the landlords and the peasants was capable of initiating fundamental changes in society. But we have very few references to outbursts of peasant antagonism. By and large, peasant discontent was contained through religious and ideological propaganda. And if still the peasants found the situation unbearable, they could move, page 330, to virgin areas and multiply the existing units of production by founding new villages, para. The question has been asked whether feudalism is old wine in new bottles or an altogether new phenomenon which happened once only. 12. The answer in relation to India depends on what we mean by feudalism. If we see feudalism merely as political disintegration and administrative decentralization brought about by chiefs and vassals, we will have to admit that it occurred again and again in Indian history till the establishment of British Raj. But if we see feudalism as a form of social order in which the possessing class appropriated the surplus produce of the peasants by exercising superior rights over their land and persons, we can say that the phenomenon did not appear before the advent of the Guptas. In the age of the Rig Veda, tribal chiefs supported by priests mainly lived on the spoils of war plundered from the indigenous and foreign tribes. In later Vedic times, princes and priests lived on a share of the produce occasionally extracted from the peasants. In post-Vedic Maurya and post-Maurya periods, down to the beginning of the Christian era, they largely lived on regular taxes in cash and kind collected by royal officials from the peasantry. Rich landowners and the Maurya state also used the services of slaves and hired laborers who were virtually forced labor and who were engaged in production. 13. A few beneficiaries, mainly Brahmanas, lived on the revenues collected from villages, but this practice was not widespread and the beneficiaries did not enjoy any administrative right. But from the Gupta period onwards appear a large number of landlords who chiefly lived on the revenues from the land earmarked for them, and from the 8th century AD onwards they were given authority over the land itself. Naturally, never before were the peasants and craftsmen attached to the land subjected to such direct control of the priests, temples, chiefs, vassals, and officials as in the 5 centuries following the fall of the Gupta Empire. Never before was the class of landed intermediaries so deeply entrenched, both politically and economically, as during this period. The pre-Muslim medieval period may be regarded as the classical age of feudalism in India, for the Muslim introduced large-scale cash payment, 14, page 331, which loosened the direct control of the landed intermediaries over the peasants. Thus, the feudalism of our period was largely concerned with collecting the surplus from the peasants, mainly in kind through superior rights in their land and occasionally through forced labor, which is not found on any considerable scale before the early centuries of the Christian era and partly continues after the Turkish conquest. The whole political structure was reared on land grants so that both secular and religious beneficiaries developed a vested interest in the preservation of feudal principalities, not only against similar rivals but also against the insurrections of the peasants. Para. Indian feudalism, however, passed through several distinct stages. The age of the Guptas and the following 2 centuries saw the beginning of land grants to temples and brahmanas, and the number of such grants increased steadily and their nature changed basically in the kingdoms of the Palas, the Pratiharas, and the Rashtrakutas. In the earlier period, only usufructuary, usufructuary rights were generally given. But from the 8th century onwards, proprietary rights were transferred to the donis. The process of grants culminated in the 11th and 12th centuries, when northern India was parcelled into numerous political and economic units, largely held by secular and religious donis who enjoyed the gift villages as little better than fiefs. But in western and central India, the classical type of feudalism was affected by the revival of trade and urbanism, the increasing use of coins, and the disuse of forced labor. Notes 1. In order to place this fact on a firmer basis, a region-wise statistical analysis of land grants is needed. 2. Supra P126 semicolon, Romila Thapar, Presidential Address, Punjab History Conference, Patiala, 1975. 3. We have some instances of tax-paying agraharas in Orissa and in some parts of South India. 4. E.D.D. Koshambi and V.V. Gokhale, verse 1175. 5. E.D. P.H. Shastri, XXXVIII, 38. 6. E.I. XXIX, 29, 5, page 332. 7. Ramacharita 2, 40. 8. Ibid, 39 to 12. 9. Ibid, 40. 10. R. S. Sharma, Decay of Gangetic Towns in Gupta and Post-Gupta Times, Journal of Indian History, Golden Jubilee number 1973, 135 to 50. 11. E.D. and T.R. G.P. Majumdar and S.C. Banerjee, Introduction, page Roman 8, stop. 12. S.C. Sarkar, The Quarterly Review of Historical Studies 3, 1962 to 63, 126. 13. Some of these arguments are developed by the author in Chapter 5 and 6 of Shudras in Ancient India and in, quote, Stages in Ancient Indian Economy, unquote, Enquiry, 4. 14. Moorland, Agrarian System of Muslim India, pp. 204 to 5. Next, Appendix 1, page 333, The Land System in Medieval Orissa, circa AD 750 to 1200.